All right, so my name is Nancy Ortenberg. I'm the head of marketing and customer experience at the Toronto Transit Commission. I've been at the Toronto Transit Commission for about 14 months now, but I've had many decades in public transit and public service. What we're going to talk about today is providing public services, specifically transit in our case, to Gen Z. And what does that mean for you guys who are providing services for other parts of life, whether it's recreation or taxes or getting your property taxes paid or any of the other things you need to do from a municipal, provincial, or federal level of government. Are Gen Z really different than any other demanding generation before them? Do they need special treatment in the way that public services are delivered? Up until now, the older segment of Gen Z, we'll call them the 18 to 27-year-olds today, have had their parents interacting with public services for them, registering them for camp programs, making sure that everything was okay for them. Did they have enough bus fare, or more likely than not, did they drive them to whatever activity or destination they needed to go to? But Gen Z are starting to dip their toes into adulthood, and things are getting real. Their first shock is generally how much everything costs, and how there never seems to be enough money in their debit card accounts. The COVID pandemic and getting into the pattern of being stuck at home, which is carried on far beyond the elements we thought were going to happen when we were in 2022, has sheltered this group in particular from a lot of the realities that other generations have experienced to prepare them for adulthood. Of course, they know about the realities. They're watching them on social media all the time, seeing other people comment, and probably laugh at the goofs that happen, but actually dealing with those realities, that's a whole new thing for Gen Z. They lost that opportunity of either being away at college or university, or going out and paying rent for the first time, making it through the school year on a budget, because like all of us, they were stuck at home with all those supports in place. It's almost as if that generation just skipped that part. But they still have the broad perspectives of being encouraged to have their opinions, and in the flash of a Snapchat, they will share them with you. This is the next generation of home buyers, condo buyers, and residents consuming your services in the first person without the experience of sort of dipping their toes into having to do that. Why would you, as a leader in the public sector, be interested to know this? Well, as I'm about to get into it, there's lots of reasons why you want to be on top of this. Did that work? There we go. I recently saw these two headlines talking about how we can transform our organizations through the power of great questions and the power of storytelling and presentations. And I, like many, enjoy a good story, and to me, the greatest question out there is why? Why are we doing things this way? And like many of you, the answer that makes my skin crawl is, well, Nancy, because we've always done it this way. So today we're here to talk about Gen Z and providing customer experiences. And instead of putting up a bunch of stats, I think I might make it more memorable if I tell you a story about a couple great questions that came up at the TTC that we were challenged with in the last year. It's a story about Gen Z and their negative perception of our brand. And the second question that followed is, what is the connection between that negative perception of the TTC brand and our fare evasion problem? And most importantly, what are we going to do about it? I think by sharing our stories and the questions that we asked, will have you asking, could this be me? It's not going. There we go. Did I do that or did you do that, Stan? Okay, I'll just tell you when we get to the next slide. How about, we'll just put this clicker away. So the story starts last spring. Just after I had arrived at the TTC, the Auditor General for the City of Toronto had done some research that revealed that fare evasion was higher than we thought. We had and still have a fare evasion problem on the TTC. That's people not jumping on the system and not paying their fares. It's a big problem. It's a $140 million big problem. Yeah. Operating funds are a challenge, state of good repair is a challenge, and the post-COVID ridership had not returned in the way that we expected. There were a lot of factors impacting our situation. And we'd also identified that Gen Z would be our target market to increase ridership growth and return to those pre-COVID ridership numbers. Sounds like a great plan. The older Gen Z group, 18 to 25-year-olds, can we go to the next slide, are starting new jobs or heading into post-secondary experiences. Some are new to Toronto, had likely never ridden a streetcar or the subway before. Some might not understand the payment systems. Almost 40% of that group of Gen Zs are new to the country. We also wanted to speak with Gen Z who have been in the city since before COVID. This group enjoyed free rides during COVID because there was a period of time where we didn't ask people to pay because of the economic impacts. But somehow they didn't want to start paying when the pandemic was over. So we've got this fare evasion problem. Next slide. Before we get ahead ourselves into the story, let's make sure we're all on the same page about who Gen Z is. They're currently a group that are between 12 and 27 years old. For our purposes, we're focusing on the upper half of that cohort, so 18 to 27. They're digitally native, and that means having grown up and being highly comfortable using digital technologies, such as the internet, social media, mobile devices. Gen Z intuitively understands digital tools and platforms, as opposed to digital immigrants who had to adopt these technologies later in life. You, me, most likely digital immigrants. So the Gen Z and younger millennials have been surrounded from technology at a very early age. It implies not just a familiarity with digital tools, but also a mindset that's shaped by instant access to information, online socialization, and the ability to navigate multiple digital platforms effortlessly. So let's step back to the story about our $140 million fare evasion problem and our target growth market paying their fares. Next slide, please. The problem was first approached in the typical way. We have a fare evasion problem, therefore we should do a multi-channel communications and marketing campaign that primarily focused on print media. We were trying to talk to people of different ages who have different reasons for evading fares. So we had this multi-pronged approach, many messages fits all kind. The campaign was not a success. We got some limited press, a lot of negative sentiment, and criticism that faded within about 4 to 5 weeks. It did not entice people to pay their fares. Recall that I mentioned prior that Gen Z is our ridership growth target market. Knowing that Gen Z do not like to be talked to, how do you think this campaign landed with them? Yeah, I see someone in the front row shaking her head. Yeah, no, it didn't work. It didn't. So knowing all those stats we showed you before and the information, our marketing and social media teams proposed a plan B. Gen Z responded when they are spoken with and engaged, and even more so when one of them is saying it to them themselves. In the social media business, we call this a collab. Next slide. We know that the Gen Z don't like being talked at, so a great technique in social media is to collaborate with an up-and-coming influencer, someone to whom Gen Z is already listening, but they aren't so popular yet that it's impossible to afford their endorsement. Okay? What a great plan, right? Lots of young influencers in Toronto, almost reasonably priced. This is a great way to speak to hundreds of thousands of students before the back to school. What a great plan B. Back in my early days of marketing, we would put advertisements in a newspaper, and we'd pay thousands of dollars, more if you wanted color. We might reach a couple of thousand people with a small ad. Today, we collab and reach out versus via digital media, reaching thousands of people within hours. Next slide. So because we've done collabs before, the process wasn't the problem. It was May, so we had plenty of time to plan for the August launch in the back-to-school period, right? We identified 2 influencers local to Toronto. They each had good following. We researched and determined that we wanted to work with them. We had a first and a second pick. And we knew that the asking price was going to be about $10,000 to collaborate with us, for either of them. So our marketing manager set up a time, got on the call, and in very short order, influencer number 1 said, "No. Nope, I'm sorry, I cannot do a collab with you." In her words, "I can't do a collab even for 10 grand because collaborating with your brand will hurt my brand and my followers won't believe me anymore." She was 17 years old. So, being very humble right now, as a Gen Xer, my reaction was, to be honest, more judgmental than curious. And I recommended to our social team that we go to our second choice and see how that goes. And what do you think happened? Another 17-year-old. Exactly the same result. I cannot align myself with the TTC brand. It will bring me down to support you. At this point, I thought, well, this might only be two opinions, but the answer was identical, almost to the word. I thought, we have a problem that we don't even understand or know about. So I invoked my inner Ted Lasso, and I thought, no, we need to get more curious and less judgmental and figure this one out. So next slide, please. We had a lot of questions about why we got this kind of response from the influencers, knowing that they're listening to their audiences and they are repeating what they're hearing. How could they think so poorly of one of the most iconic brands associated with Toronto? Everyone knows that TTC. Sure, we've got some issues, but to refuse us flat out for $10,000 for about 20 seconds of work? Up to this point, we hadn't done a lot of in-person research, and we needed to figure out how to reach Gen Z before the back-to-school period happened, which for us, we start around August 15th, August 20th, and go into the first 2 weeks of September. Time was ticking. So we quickly organized interviews with Gen Z representing each Toronto ward, balancing gender, racial background, student versus employment status. Our ad agency that we partnered with recorded almost 600 minutes of discussion. And while we found many things that paralleled those other Gen Z research bullets that I had up on the screen beforehand, there was one message that stood out, and it was like a bolt of lightning that struck us. It was about how they perceived us as a brand. So just to step away from the stories for a second, next slide, please. When brands are doing qualitative interviews with customers, they often ask this question. If you had to describe product A, in this case Red Bull, as if they were a person, what kind of person would they be? And instantly, all of you formulated a picture of what you think a Red Bull person would look like, right? If I had to say Red Bull was a person. Next slide. Somebody who's like high risk, outdoorsy, fit, buff, doing all kinds of crazy activities, really energetic. Right? So you get the idea, the sort of the pattern. When we interviewed our 15 Gen Zs, we took them through the Red Bull example and said, so tell me, what do you think the TTC is? Who is the TTC as a person? Go to the next slide.
When I see the TTC as a person, I think of them as like a solid 50-year-old person. Mm-hmm. But because you look at them and you expect, oh, you have life experience. I could see you knowing what you're talking about. And then they're kind of like, I have no idea.
Arriving at North York Center. Doors will open on the right.
So now imagine, you're the head of marketing and customer experience for your brand, and that's the message you get. We'll go to the next slide. So yes, we are a solid 50-year-old with life experience, and they expect that we know what we're doing. Now, thank you, Mark, for bringing out the 2.5 million rides per day, because we're now at the turning point in our story where the central character, that being the TTC, and myself and the team realize that there's something very wrong. We've hit a low. There's a lot that is expected from us, and we aren't seen to be delivering to expectations by the very group that we have strategized to return us to pre-COVID ridership. A generation that is quick to jump on social media, influence public opinion and algorithms about our brand. And now that we know this, we can't ignore it. So we needed to look at ourselves humbly and say, they're our customers, we need to work with them, and we need to be authentic and vulnerable, because that is what Gen Z is all about. Be vulnerable, get real. This might be the most frightening thing I've ever said to a public sector audience. Most of us in this room were raised with the careful, planned, and designed corporate communications that are designed to answer the question but minimize risk, right? I would venture to say that very few of you have ever gone to a podium with the purpose of being vulnerable. Right? As boomers and Gen X's, we were trained to show positivity, mitigate that negative impact. It's not going to work for Gen Z. So authenticity is really about responding to their justified criticisms. So after extensive debate, briefing our leadership team, you can imagine their reactions when I played that video clip, and offering some solutions, we settled on the direct approach. We were going to talk about the elephant in the room. We still wanted to address fare evasion, but also mitigate that negative perception by being authentic and acknowledging, yep, we don't always get it right. For context, we've got 2.5 million rides offered per day on bus, streetcar, subways that integrate with 7 different other transit providers in the GTA. Gen Z doesn't probably know this. How can we have them care about context, ensure that the message lands without talking at Gen Z? Well, we collabed, but we did it in a little bit of a different way. Next slide. So we took a different approach. Oh, we'll go to the next slide after this one. We took a bit of a different approach and partnered with Toronto influencer Moose Bandango. Moose is on the cusp between millennial and Gen Z. He's a little bit over 28, but he's still cool enough to relate to them, right? We used a popular social media trend and Moose's preferred style of reporter on the street. We very vulnerably asked them, do they pay? And why don't you pay on camera? We'll roll the track.
Have you taken the TTC before?
Yeah, I have taken the TTC.
I do take the TTC.
What do you like about it?
It gets me where I need to go.
It's an affordable way of public transit that's good for the earth.
Tell me one thing you don't like about the TTC.
Sometimes it can be efficient, sometimes it's just terrible.
The fare, and then sometimes like the people who are on it.
It's not reliable.
Do you ever evade your fare?
I do not.
A couple times.
A couple
not
times.
regularly.
Why do you think people evade their fare?
Before I was told that the streetcars were free, so I did evade my
That's not your fault! How much money do you think is avoided in fare every year? I'll give you a hint, it's a number that's in the millions.
2 million. 2 million?
2 million? That's a good
would say like 30 million.
You'd say like 30 million.
That's crazy.
That's $140 million.
Okay, wow.
That's a pretty big number, huh?
Yeah,
That's upsetting.
that's messed up.
That's a lot of money, and all of that could be put towards making the service better, having more workers, making the subway more safe for people like you. Let's list off some things that you could get.
New cars.
Yes.
Especially for line 2.
If you pay your fare, those prices can stay down. They can make sure that it's more accessible for everybody. That's why I'm tapping this video right now to tell y'all, tap your card. It's not that hard, right?
Your card.
Next slide. Moose hit on a number of items in that clip, asking them what problems they present for them, getting their ideas on how big the problem is, and causing them to think about it a bit, and asking them, well, what would you do? Our comments to those posts also reflected that. Ironically, a few weeks after this aired, there was a federal announcement that we were getting funding for new Line 2 trains, so that lined up even though we didn't know that was going to happen. But one of the things that also came out of the research was that Gen Z was aware of societal issues and realized that not everything is within the direct control of the TTC. Next slide. One of our interviewers said this: I recognize that there's only so much the TTC can do. More so to do with something that the City of Toronto can do for unhoused people or people who are mentally unwell. I think that speaks to a deeper social issue, a socioeconomic and political issue rather than a TTC concern. So larger societal issues are bigger than the TTC. So we do get a little bit of grace from Gen Z because they understand the interplay, because they are connected and they're very aware of societal pressures on public services. Next slide. So there is passive sympathy out there for those amongst Gen Z. And the next great question became, well, can we turn this passive sympathy into activity? And maybe that activity being behaving better on the TTC and paying your fare. Some of our interviewees had talked about how people behave when they're riding the system, so this was an easy topic for us. Gen Z also wanted us to show them that we get them, and that means being on trend and being current. And in social media, the world of being on trend means at most days or weeks, not months. So you have to be nimble in your decision making and give authority to your frontline staff that are working on your social teams to act quickly without layers of approvals. Being scrappy and putting together content and get it out there as fast as possible. It's far more important to Gen Z to be relevant than to be perfect. So we jumped on a trend that was really popular in August last year called the demure trend. You may have heard of it, which had 35 million views worldwide within weeks. So we knew that it would resonate with our ridership as well. Next slide. So we collabed with another local influencer and created this video as part of our back to school campaign.
Do you see the way that I'm standing beside the door to give people time to exit before I enter? I'm being very mindful, very demure. I'm not doing too much and locking the door like some of you. Do you see the way that I'm standing to the right on the escalator instead of blocking the left so that people can easily pass? I'm being very mindful. If they ask me to move, I say yes, ma'am. Very thoughtful. Do you see these headphones? Do you see the way that I'm using them instead of making my music choice everyone else's business by playing my phone on full volume? I'm being very thoughtful, very considerate, not bothering my fellow travelers. Very demure.
So I love that you all thought that was funny because Gen Z loved it. Hundreds of thousands of views, really positive sentiment, great support for, yes, please, everybody do this. Get those pointers. Behave like you respect the TTC without saying, behave like you respect the TTC. When we see something like this, they get it. Because they're constantly surfing, watching, observing, they understand the lingo, because they're consuming all that content for hours every day. Had we done a piece about being demure on the TTC under any other context, no one would know what we were talking about, and they would think we were talking at them. But by doing it this way, we were talking with them on something that they think is really cool right now. So what's the end of the story? Between the Moose Instagram reel, so all of these are on Instagram, we are not on TikTok, like most of you are not on TikTok. Between the Instagram reel and the collab on the Demure reel, we exceeded 400,000 views in under 6 weeks. It's a far bigger reach than a print campaign. And ridership is returning slowly. And fare evasion, because I was talking about that at the beginning, well, I can't say the number, but we have a confidential report coming out to the Auditor General in the next few weeks. And what I can share is that the result for streetcar fare evasion, which is our biggest problem, is a generous double-digit reduction in the last 5 months. So those are stats I am very proud to say prove that we must, as public sector leaders, be more curious and less judgmental. Next slide. At the beginning, I talked about two things: telling a great story and asking great questions to transform your organization. Knowing what we learned, knowing what we know about Gen Z, I'd offer that is now incumbent upon you as public sector leaders to think, how will you need to transform your services to meet their demands? Gen Zs are more vocal than millennials, and in the next 10 years, we'll be demanding planning, housing, transit, and healthcare supports with greater transparency and efficiency, which really dovetails nicely onto the conversation we had before the break about getting back to basics and getting it right. Next item. As an example, TTC provides transportation, get me from here to there, but it is also a community. That's what we heard from Gen Z. It's like, I'm there with other people. We're all, experiencing the same thing at the same time. And one of our things our research told us was that Gen Z was dismayed about moving into adulthood and moving into relationships. They had deleted their dating apps. Almost 79% of them have deleted a dating app in the last year. So we took a very calculated but bold move that, yes, did take a lot of convincing up at the leadership level. And we designed a series of episodes that talked about people finding friends and love on the TTC while commuting. So while risky, because let me tell you, there were some nights I was like, oh God, I don't know if I'm going to have a job tomorrow. It has paid off. We are currently pushing towards 300,000 views of this series with more than an 85% average positive sentiment rating. What we're hearing is, you get us, you trust us, we are now going to trust you a little bit more and give you a little bit more slack when things go wrong. We're filling that bucket of goodwill that allows us to make those inevitable mistakes. With 2.5 million rides a day, something's going to go wrong. But their opinion of us is improving. Futurists expect that their social media commentary will evolve. And what does this mean for you, even if you're not providing transit services? Is any of this applicable to your work? It most definitely is, because it's about the customer experience and understanding your customer. Next slide. If you're not a digital native, or you are someone who is not consuming content regularly and you don't understand it, And I'll be honest, there's some things we put up on Instagram and I look at them and review them and go, okay. And my marketing manager, social media crews, Nancy, don't worry, people will get it. I'm like, okay. I don't get it. But if they get it and then you look at it the next day and it's like, wow, 5,000 views in 12 hours. Amazing. You need to have people on your team who are on top of the trends and can explain it to you. The greatest risk for you is not doing social right. Doing it right means having people on your team empowered to advise you and tell you honestly if something is going to work or not going to work on different platforms. What works on Instagram will not work on LinkedIn and vice versa. You can't do one social post and plaster it everywhere. You won't develop the communities. Your goal is to develop a community that trusts you and is interested in what you have to say because you're saying what they're thinking about. I will admit, for the past 2 years, all of this was done by a grand total of 1 manager and 2 junior specialists. If I add up their ages combined, it's still less than 100. If you want to appeal to Gen Z and young millennials, this is the route to success. You have to hire great people, be clear about boundaries, because we still are the public sector, but let them run with it. Use customer journey mapping techniques to really understand what your pain point is, make it easy, get back to basics, make it make sense for them. Make it as easy as ordering on Amazon. Next slide. Gen Z is still throwing a lot of barbs out there. It's easy to complain when you have a device in your hand and you can be anonymous if you want to. It's sort of like a digital buckshot that can be ignored, that can be shot out, but it fades very quickly. In the future, thought leaders predict that as Gen Zs take on the responsibilities of family, or the typical adulting patterns like home ownership, mortgages, this will squeeze their ability to cope. And with that, they will focus on those issues, those touch points or pain points that are most important to them. But they will organize to be more involved. They'll find other people and form communities about who also share the same sentiment about pain points. And because they're digital natives, and as I said before, most of them are creating content at home in their spare time, you'll see more interest groups with organized, supported volunteers raising money and creating content to drive their message home. They're going to do that campaign quality marketing and comms to garner support for their causes. Who within your organization is tasked with monitoring, tracking, and advising on that? Probably no one at this point. I hope that this has given you some food for thought as we proceed into the conference. I know I'm excited to learn from each of you, and I hope that in sharing our story and the great questions that it prompted will help you to be more curious and understand the phenomenon of Gen Z. Oh, last slide. And I think we've got about 3 minutes or so for questions.
Hello, thank you so much. Learned a lot. One of the things we often hear, because I work in post-secondary, is that it's great that you can do all of this, but how do you actually show that it has an impact? So how are you finding you're measuring the ROI from the great views? Because I don't think a lot of traditional business people see the correlation.
Great question. So there's your typical social media marketing comms views. You know, we can look at engagements, impressions, positive sentiment. We use Heather, we use Hootsuite, and what's the other platform that we use? Sprout Social. So they have algorithms to analyze your sentiment. So you can go buy any one campaign, but like everybody in marketing and communications, you know that it's not one piece that moves the needle on a KPI, and our KPI that was most important to us at the time was fare evasion. So, and we're only assessing fare evasion maybe once every quarter or 2 quarters to say, like, because it's you have to have plain clothes people go out there, see who's tapping, who's not tapping by mode. You know, we have lots of data analysts as well in the organization. The good thing for us is that transit is very KPI heavy, and there are industry standard KPIs that we have to follow as part of getting our funding. So we're already pretty robust on the operational, financial efficiency and effectiveness KPIs, and then you layer in, okay, well, this is where the KPI is at, and this is what we did in social, this is what we did in outreach, this is what we did in customer service. Did that KPI budge, and can we attribute it back? You're never going to get a direct correlation, so don't try. You'll drive yourself crazy. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
Hi, thank you. Can you share a bit more about how you did convince the influencers that started this off for you after you heard the hard no's? How did you?
What we didn't go back to them. The two influencers that we started with that said, no, I won't work with you. We're like, okay, well, that bus has left the station. And then we started working with Moose and I can't remember the other fellow's name that did the Demure trend.
Okay, so you didn't have to convince them. They were just receptive.
There was no convincing. It was a hard no. Maybe they'll want to collab with us now that we've done so much social, and I encourage you all to look at the Instagram reels and stories that we have up. Our social team is a bunch of workhorses. They're cranking out, between 6 and 12 a month. We did 15 posts for Taylor Swift. We actually just won an award for all of North America for comprehensive management of the Swifties that came into town. We had 100,000 additional rides almost every day of her concerts, and we didn't lose anybody. There were no incidents. Everything went really smoothly, and we got lots of positive love and sentiment on social from our Taylor Swift campaigns. So in transit, it's the negative. When nothing happens, it's a great day.
So I guess if there's time for one more question, is there? Yeah, okay. As someone in a big bureaucracy who's really fond of bland, risk-averse communication, do you have any advice for how to get buy-in on a different way to communicate, or communicating in the way that makes more sense for Gen Z?
Yeah, so I want to be really clear and transparent. What you're seeing up here is about 18 months into little tiny steps. So if you go back through our Instagram reels, it'll give you a great idea of how we started. It'll also show you some of the cringy social media posts that we were putting up 3 and 4 years ago, but you have to start with small incremental things to work your leadership up to understanding that this really does engage. You're not just putting out social posts, you are building a community. So let's just take Instagram because that's what we use. When Victoria, our director of marketing and social media, started 2.5 years ago, we had about 18,000, 15,000 followers. It was pretty low. We're now at 60,000. So yes, there's the number of followers and there's a number of views. But then what we really are looking for is engagements. How many people are reposting this? How many people are sharing it with their network? I mean, think about your own personal things. You're not going to repost something on LinkedIn that is really super controversial because it's a professional website. So we think about, I see all kinds of posts. I'm like, oh, I'll never post that, right? Because it's a reflection of you. Well, Gen Z thinks it the same way on Instagram. I'm not going to repost anything that I'm not in alignment with and that doesn't meet my value system. So you have to start out with little things and you have to watch and say, okay, did that one work? So it's one thing our social media team does on a weekly basis. We posted this. What happened? Did it land? Did it not land? Do we need to tweak it or do we need to abandon that style because it doesn't work for the community? And then testing that back and forth is how you get to having 100,000 followers.
So thank you, Nancy.
Thank you.
I mean, I hope that you also take from this, what you see is a leader here who has got the courage to stand up and recognize that actually when you start to understand your customer, whether it's Gen Z or any customer, when you really start to understand their needs, what it does is it starts to give you transformative insight in your business, and it starts to lead to change. And you don't need huge swathes of resources to get after that. I think there were 3 people you said who in a scrappy approach.
Yeah, in the first year, I think we spent $7,000.
Okay. So
most of that was to buy 2 iPhones. So we had no budget. It was scrappy. We used a free version of Canva and CapCut. They were editing on the phone. We like, you'd think, oh, it's a TTC, they must have big budget. No.
So for everybody that's sitting there going, I'll never be able to do that, I don't have the resources to be able to do that, you can. And hopefully you take some inspiration from today. And thank you very much, Nancy, for an outstanding story. We look forward to hearing more about it.
Thank you.